Good morning. Hey,
Good
it's
morning.
Trish. I'm with Hip Homeschool Moms, and I have Whit Jones here. And Whit is new. He is part of the Apologia um, group that now has started a new series that we're all terribly excited about American literature.
Hmm.
Say, hey, Whit.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. And we have Leanne here. Leanne is with Hip
Hello.
Homeschool Moms. Leanne is our quiet one. She sits there and looks beautiful. But she does all the work behind the scenes. So I can't fuss,
I
right?
do.
So thanks, Leanne, for being here.
You're welcome.
So, Wit, I am totally fascinated. I saw American literature in Arizona. I did not get to sneak it out of the convention hall because I was afraid that the Apologia people might catch me. So, but I loved it. Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. It's such a
Yeah.
beautiful text. But
Yes.
before we go there, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you homeschooled. So, and you're actually still homeschooling, right? You still have one at home, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so
We.
tell us about yourself.
Okay. Let's see. I have four children. I met my wife Amy in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where
Woohoo!
she finished her undergrad at UNC Chapel Hill and got her master's in special education.
Yes.
Probably made her better wife for a crazy person like me.
Oh,
And she and I met there at the Chapel Hill Bible Church and got
oh,
married. And at UNC is where I did my master's and my PhD in English and American literature.
I knew I liked you. You know I'm from
Yeah,
North Carolina,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I don't know if I remember that or not, but yeah, I came to love North Carolina. I had taught 3 years of high school English, and then came to UNC to get my master's, still thinking I might teach high school, and
Okay.
taught a year at Chapel Hill High.
Oh.
Before I had taught in rural North Georgia, working mostly with blue collar kids, and
Mhm.
but then Chapel Hill was a culture far away, far removed from that. Most of the kids had parents with two PhDs or an MD and a law
Oh.
degree, and a lot of kids went from Chapel Hill High, which was a public school, to Ivy League colleges and universities, and
Wow.
so it was a very different place. And I found I really loved teaching English, but whatever the culture, I wasn't great with 15 and 16-year-olds. I was better. I UNC had
I'm
let
not sure
me.
I agree with them either. And I'm a mom.
Yeah. UNC had let me teach some freshman English while I was getting my master's, which was a little unusual. They don't usually made you get your master's first before they let you teach, but I was
Oh, okay.
teaching from the first time I walked on campus, and partly because I had taught high school, and I saw the extra level of motivation that college students had, a
Yeah.
little bit of extra maturity, a little bit of extra
Yeah.
concern about their GPA and their career, and that gave me, and the opportunity to talk at a bit higher level about my subject sometimes gave me a little bit more traction, and so I was a little better with college students. But
That's fantastic.
once Amy and I had our children, I think I learned a lot about younger kids that would have helped me as a high school teacher. I wonder what it would be like if I went back to teach high school today, because I've developed a lot more confidence. And we have three boys and a girl: Will and Mary Claire and Sam and Cliff. Will is 24, Mary Claire is 21, Sam is 18, and Cliff is 16. And Amy and I only had sisters, so three boys was a
Oh.
bit of a shock. But
Oh, how
Amy's
fun.
become a real connoisseur of boys, and we love our daughter, of course, too. We have, and she married early. She was super mature spiritually and emotionally, and met a guy just like her, and they got married early. And we already have a granddaughter, even though she's just 21. We have a granddaughter and another one on the way in September. So they're out at Dallas Theological Seminary, Mary Claire and Isaac. My son Will is also married. Sam is about to go to school at Bryan College, where I've taught for 24 years. When I left Chapel Hill, I was ABD, and we had a baby on the way, and I needed a job even though I hadn't finished my dissertation. And
Yep.
Bryan College ended up being a good fit. I had written a lot about biblical allusions and themes in literature at Chapel Hill, and it was a
Hmm.
conservative enough program, at least back at that time, that if I proved that what I was talking about was really in the text, then my professors were fine with that, whether they were believers or not. And
That's
so
fantastic.
a place where I could bring my faith into the classroom without any reservation, and also my whole life, where I could talk, where when we talked about, studied Ibsen's A Doll's House and watched that marriage fall apart, I could talk about my own marriage and the ways Christian faith and the instructions the Bible gives us could enable people to make a very different marriage from what Nora and Torvald have there in the play. Being able to just share my life, my
Yeah.
child
Yes.
raising and my marriage, and what Christ has done with regard to helping me overcome fears and insecurities. Those things come up naturally with literature, because literature is really about life. And so
Right.
I enjoyed being at Bryan, because it's a school where I can bring my whole life into the classroom, not just my mind. And I can make all sorts of connections between the Bible and literature that are really there without any kinds of reservations. I actually probably have more academic
Freedom.
freedom
Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
Christian
I love
college than
that.
I would have somewhere else. So,
Well, it's interesting because when I saw your bio, I told you that Bryan was one of the universities we had actually considered. We're all coincidentally in Tennessee. I think this is the first blab that we have
wow.
had where everybody is Tennessee. So,
Okay.
yay for
Yeah,
us. So,
yeah,
but
yeah,
Bryan College is one of the universities or the colleges that we looked at when we were before my husband started working at the school here in Memphis, and I was very impressed. So it's sort of fun to get to meet a
yeah,
professor now.
yeah,
So that was our number two alternative
yeah,
because of that environment you just described.
yeah,
So that's a perfect environment for you to cultivate your book
yeah,
to be working around. So tell us a little bit about, I love how you just introduced it. Perfect segue. So tell us a little bit about how this book came to be. I know sometimes it comes from just experiences in a classroom and sometimes it doesn't. So how did your book come to be? What inspired you?
yeah. Well, about 9 years ago, I had a medical condition that could have been serious. I started having problems swallowing, which is never good.
That's a really
And
big problem. Yeah.
for about a year, I was undiagnosed. But the neurologist said two neurologists said there could only be of one or two things. It had to be either myasthenia gravis, which is an autoimmune
Hmm.
disease that affects your muscles, or ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And for a
Hmm.
year, I was undiagnosed, and God really reassured me somehow that I was going to live. But when I was finally diagnosed with a blessedly mild case of myasthenia, I think I thought, I want to leave. I've done so much teaching, but I really want to leave a mark in the world.
Oh.
I want to have something in print that can bless other people, that comes from the knowledge I've gotten as a teacher over a number of years. Will was only 3 weeks old when we moved to Bryan, and yeah, this will be my 25th year of teaching at Bryan, and probably about my 35th year of teaching high school or college, full or part time. But I didn't have much that was published, and so I thought that maybe this was a time to make some of my expertise and some of what I learned about literature available to more people. And my wife Amy and I feel like that a lot of conservative Christians have trouble interpreting literature,
Mm.
and they don't
Yes.
always see how closely literature relates to our walk with Christ. What a resource literature is, because it the works that last, the works that become classic, last because every new generation is seeing something of themselves, their lives, their situations, their struggles, their
Hmm.
hopes in those
Hmm.
characters and
Right.
in those stories. And all truth is God's truth. So literature, the great literature, always touches on universal truths that have been there since God made man and woman, and therefore it fleshes out biblical truth in really wonderful ways. It gives vivid pictures of human godlikeness and human brokenness, and sometimes the two of them all mixed up together.
Yes.
And
Lots
so
of times.
I think Amy and I both felt that a literature curriculum that made literature more accessible for believers, and helped them see its application to life, not just see it as an academic subject, but see it as a real resource for understanding their faith better. I think we felt like there should be a curriculum like that. And I emailed Apologia and pitched the idea of writing a literature text for them. And they didn't have a literature text yet. And I think they had already been thinking of branching out into that subject area. And Jeff Myers, the head of Summit, was a friend of mine. He had been a colleague here at Bryan for several
Oh,
years, and
yeah.
he recommended me to Apologia, or put in a good word. And I think they thought I was a good fit because I had taught high school as well as college.
Yes. Yes.
And I was a homeschool dad. We had 4 homeschool children, and we had been pretty successful. My oldest son was a literature major at Bryan, and he took the ACT at 15 just for a dry run and made a 36 on his reading score. So we felt like we had done well with our own kids, and I had taught part of their writing, and so I thought, and I do feel like I'm pretty good at making literature clear. In an intro to lit class at Bryan, I can watch students as we're working on a poem look really confused, and then watch lights go on in their faces as we discuss it.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that's the issue with literature a lot of times, is people just don't get what it's really saying and how it's saying it. And if I could use questions and answers in a book for homeschoolers to take them through the analysis of a work and write the answers as well as the questions, so that when there's not a teacher in the house, they can check their answers against mine, I thought that might be a neat way to teach literature. And in those questions, I could bring in life applications by the end after we'd analyzed the work. So that was the idea. And I'm a little bit more of a Brit Lit professor at Bryan. I'm more of a Brit Lit professor than an American Lit, even though I teach some American Lit. But Apologia was thinking everybody reads American Lit. Everybody takes American Lit. So maybe that would be the best one to start out with.
But you're going to, so now that you said that,
Brit Lit book. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. So now that you said that, I guess we're looking for a second book in this series, right?
Yeah.
Well, I am so excited to hear about that because, I have 2 kids in high school too. So I am tickled to death to learn more about American Lit. We plan to start it this year as well. So do you have the book with you? Did you you happen to have a copy? I'd show the inside. This is a beautiful book. It is. Apologia has really upped their game in their curriculum. It is stunning inside. Look at that.
Doug Powell designed the book, and Amy and I were both really impressed at just how much color is in there.
Oh, yeah.
And how nice the layout is. And even though it's a pretty thick book, the pages are not intimidatingly full of just print.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
It's engaging. Yeah,
it's
gorgeous.
Looked
a lot prettier than I thought it would. Yeah.
I looked through it in Arizona, and it's fantastic. He says he needs to tilt his camera down a little bit, laugh out loud. Somebody wants to see it. Do it again and tilt your camera down just a smidgen so they can see it more. So go inside.
Okay.
Open it up a little bit so they can see it. I wish I had the book. I just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
Hold your book up a little bit. Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see if I can. I don't know if I can.
You're so welcome. She says thank you. She wanted to see.
Yeah, just a lot of color.
Yeah.
And a lot of classic looking old portraits of founding fathers, and this is black and white, but a nice picture of Edgar Allan Poe, and
Yeah, she said, wow, that's gorgeous. It is gorgeous. It is totally beautiful. I was blown away by how beautiful it was when I was in Arizona. I wish I had picked up one. I didn't think about it.
And there's a workbook that comes with it.
Show that too.
And that is more black and white on the inside, but it's got space for students to write answers to the questions. And it's got tests that go along with it. It's got a module test for each module. And it's got paper assignments for a short story interpretation and a poetry interpretation, one done each semester. And I also in the workbook, in the notebook, take students step by step through how to write a literary analysis paper, which is also intimidating and confusing for some people. But I actually give an example. I basically, when I'm having them write a paper on Hawthorne's The Birthmark, actually write the introduction for Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown, which they had studied previously, and a body paragraph and a conclusion and topic sentences for paragraphs and stuff. So they have an example paper basically to look at, and then I tell them to do it for the birthmark. And then second semester they interpret Robert Frost's poem Mending Wall. And again, they have an example of how to do that paper. I use Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. And I take them through the whole process of pre-writing and drafting and revision and editing and proofreading for those papers.
That's fantastic. I'm excited to see that. I totally, for me, the American literature and the British literature have been two of the areas that I have been stressing over as a high school mom, trying to find a curriculum. And I still haven't found a curriculum. I have hunted. So yes, I agree. You are an absolute perfect fit for Apologia. And there's I'm so blessed. All of us are so blessed to find them doing this. So the difference, how do you approach American literature? I know we talked about it a little bit, but explain the difference in how a secular curriculum might view it and how a Christian curriculum might take apart and understand and discuss a piece of literature. So show me the differences, what that would look like.
One difference would be that in the introduction to the colonial period, I explain Calvinism. I explain the Puritan theology that goes behind works like the famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, or even to understand what Emily Dickinson is reacting to in some of her poetry of skepticism and doubt. You need to understand the Calvinistic background of New England. So I explain that theology. And also, Puritans get such a bad rap. I explain that really, at its best, Puritanism was really connected with the Protestant Reformation, which was connected with really intellectual and humane elements that drove the whole Renaissance. So Puritans wanted to think through their faith, and they didn't want it to be just a matter of confession on certain days or a sacrament on certain days.
That's right.
They wanted to inform their whole lives. And they wanted it to be rich and vital and something that every believer had thought through. So they were some of the most powerful promoters of literacy, of universal literacy that had ever come along in Western history. And so a lot of people see Puritans as narrow, but actually they were intellectually deep. They were, for their time, they were broad and liberal. They wanted to escape some of the restrictions, along with other believers in the Renaissance, that they felt like in the Middle Ages it kind of encroached on Christian faith and made it more narrow and legalistic and compartmentalized. So I just explained that in the introduction to colonialism. And then when we're studying a sermon, obviously the Christian application is clear, but even in a story like Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown, there are very strong spiritual elements that Hawthorne is dealing with. Goodman Brown suspects that his wife might be a witch. He thinks in the forest that he sees on the way to a witch meeting. Also his deacon and his pastor and his Sunday school teacher. But the forest visions are shadowy. He sees everything in uncertain light. He never sees anyone clearly. And he goes into the forest with bad motives, knowing that he's fascinated with the idea that there might be a witch meeting. His companion is a demonic figure who clearly is supernatural and clearly is not a good guy, and yet Brown is willing to walk along with him into the forest. So what does he expect to see in the forest?
That's right. That's right.
Nothing but the truth. So Hawthorne is really raising the deep theological question of, when you're not sure how much evil is in the hearts of those around you, how consistent they are in the beliefs they say they adhere to, how do you react to those people? How do you withdraw in fear and distrust, which is what Goodman Brown ultimately does? Or out of love, do you bear all things, believe all things, and hope all things about those people, unless they're proven to be evil? Right. So Hawthorne was really analyzing his own Puritan heritage and analyzing maybe one of the weaknesses in that heritage, that sometimes conservative believers can be so dominated by the idea of evil that they forget God's goodness.
That's
They
right.
forget that we're meant out of love to take the risk of loving sinful people, and that total withdrawal is really not an option.
Right.
So Hawthorne's story is deeply spiritual and Christian in its implications, and it would be easy for a secular text to skim over
Skip it
that
and
or give it
not
short
even
shrift.
delve into it. I
Yeah.
love that. That's fascinating. See, I want it even more now. Yep.
But then
Oh,
also when you're reading somebody like Edgar Allan Poe, who, as far as I know, wasn't a Christian, his his poetry is very spiritual in its implications. The Romantics were looking for some kind of ideal, something something divine, something perfect. They believed that science was sending the message that everything was purely physical, and they wanted to say no, nature is also spiritual.
mm,
And there is something beyond the physical, something transcendent, something wonderful that human beings can connect with, but they didn't return to Christian faith. So
right.
they end up with this idealism of women or nature, or so in Poe's Annabel
Worshiping the
Lee.
creation. Yep.
Yeah, in Poe's Annabel Lee, there's a deep attachment, or the Raven, where the woman is Lenore. There's a deep
Hmm.
attachment to this woman who has died, but it's in and there's something powerful about it, and something beautiful in a way, but also something idolatrous.
And I think
And
that's one reason why
yeah,
Christians are afraid to go after and delve too deeply into literature is exactly what you're describing right now.
hmm,
All those not scriptural, not biblical influences that are sitting there that are just screaming at you in some of this
yes,
text, and that
yeah,
we don't know how to deal with that in from
yeah.
a scriptural perspective. So this is amazing. This is a fantastic course. I'm so excited. So keep
Yeah.
talking. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, no, but so with there's a lot of truth in romanticism, that we do long for something higher than the physical, than the material,
Hmm.
and some romantics, I think, looked at Christian faith as having compromised itself, and so they went looking for something else, for another source of spirituality, and they may have been right in some of their critique of Christianity. But yeah, in a poem like The Raven, the longing for connection with something eternal and transcendent is very consistent with our longing for
Right.
God. And
Right.
it's just and the fact that the speaker would really rather be in torment because he can't forget Lenore than uh, than experiencing the quiet and peace and contentment of having forgotten her and put her in the past. There's something admirable about his longing for that relationship to go on. And
Right.
I think that, again, it's a longing for God. It's a longing to be with our loved ones in heaven, but it just gets turned the wrong direction. So
That's right.
there's such a mix of truth and error in the poem, and it's beautifully written. The rhymes and the meter are almost hypnotic and cantatory, and so it's a beautiful work of art that contains a significant element of God's truth at the same time that it contains error. And just Christians, if you learn to tease out the truth from
Hmm.
the falsehood in a work of literature, at the same time you're learning how to do that with life,
That's
with
right.
complex people and situations, because there's such a mix of good and sin in every human being, and a mix of things that are consistent with Christian faith, but also at odds with Christian faith in many human institutions and life situations. So if you're learning to think critically about literature with regard to those elements, it's really preparing you for life. And that's probably one of the biggest aims of the book, is just to edify the students and their parents spiritually as they're going in, as they're reading these works that take them deep into life, that involve deep, profound observations of human beings going wrong, going right, some of both.
I love that. I'm actually tweeting that, what you just said. So sorry. I
No, that's all
was
right.
That was, I love it. So, what do you cover in here? I know you have some favorite works. I mean, obviously, I just heard your passion for the Raven. So,
Right. Right.
what are some of the American or the literature pieces that you cover? I know
Yeah,
he's pulling out the table of contents.
right. We start. Yeah, I'll try to help
I
myself
wish
remember.
I should have pulled it up. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, that's fine. We start with the colonial age, and we actually start with a Cherokee Indian myth
Okay, so wait a
of
minute.
creation.
That in and of itself is different. So
Yeah,
you're actually covering it from a period perspective.
yeah, We
Oh,
yes,
I love that. How brilliant is that? Okay, so that's great news.
and I write worldview introductions to the different periods that
Oh, that's
try to help people see where they are consistent with Christian faith and what elements were motivating the changes, for instance, from rationalism to romanticism, and what Christians can embrace. And so it helps them understand the literature to see the worldview context that it's coming from. So
oh my
introduction to the
gosh. Yeah.
colonial period, and then the age of reason and revolution is the next period, then the Romantic age, then the age of realism and the modern age. And I talk a little bit about postmodernism as well. And in the colonial age, of course, we start with the Cherokee myth of creation, and we actually talk about a number of ways that it is consistent with the Genesis account of creation. And
Isn't
then
it
also
fascinating?
questions
I,
the
I
Genesis, answers that this myth does not. That the Cherokees are left wondering about some things that Genesis answers. So yeah.
there's so many different creation stories you could have chosen. But yes, I know. I love and that's something else that I think would be a valuable discussion with our children is, you know, they're going to be confronted with the fact that there are other, you know, creation stories out there, and they
Yeah.
need to be able to defend why we believe believe in God and our story. So I'm so glad you cover that. So you cover the Cherokee perspective. Okay.
Yeah,
Why'd you pick the
and
Cherokee?
Jonathan, and we cover early writings like William Bradford's A Piece of Plymouth Plantation, talking about the Puritans who came to New England,
Mm-hmm.
and then Mary Rowlandson, who was captured by Indians and who's exposed to situations so difficult that a lot of people would have gone out of their minds. But she has this
Right.
deep faith, and in her narrative, she's constantly quoting scripture and giving us her prayers. And then Anne Bradstreet, a Puritan poet, some
Mm-hmm.
of whose poems are surprisingly sexy. She
Oh.
had a very vital relationship with her husband,
Oh
and that
yeah.
gets into some of her poetry, not graphically, but unmistakably.
Oh wow.
And then Jonathan Edwards, a lot of people only read Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, but actually he preached a lot more sermons about God's grace and love and tenderness than about God's wrath and hellfire. And so we include The Excellency of Christ, one of those really positive, grace-filled sermons for people to look at as well. And then in the chapter Inventing and Conserving the Strengths and Weaknesses of American Rationalism, we look at part of Benjamin Franklin's autobiography and Thomas
Sure.
Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. And with
I
the
love
early
that
American,
you're bringing in the founding fathers' writings
yeah,
instead
yeah,
of just going to what we would consider in traditional thought, you know, literary types.
yes.
You know, you're actually going to some of the founding fathers. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and the Declaration is beautifully written from a literary standpoint. It's a very powerful argument rhetorically, but part of what Jefferson and those who helped him write the Declaration were trying to achieve was to let the Europeans know that they were not just a bunch of yahoos with squirrel guns saying, "Leave us alone." You know, they wanted the French to come in on their side, so they wanted to sound like educated gentlemen. So
There
there are
you go.
references in the Declaration to ideas that come from the governmental philosophy of John Locke and Hobbes, and
Hmm.
it's a very polysyllabic, erudite, learned document. And so they're
I think
saying
I need a dictionary. I'm going
we're gentlemen. We've done our homework. We've thought this out. There are good philosophical reasons for breaking with Britain, and we have made appeal after appeal to George III. It's not like we haven't exhausted every possible avenue to try to improve our relationship with England. So they want to convey that they are poised, educated, thoughtful men who have come to this decision only after long, painful deliberation. And the Declaration is just brilliant at conveying all those things. So
Yes.
it's a fine work of literature. And then the Romantic Age, of course, you're going to get a little Washington Irving. Rip Van Winkle is one of the humorous works of Romanticism, and James Fenimore Cooper, his character Natty Bumppo is kind of a medieval knight in the American wilderness. I mean, Cooper's very much an idealist, and Natty Bumppo is a kind of ideal romantic hero. And but then you've also got Emerson and Thoreau, New England romantics, who were more philosophers, and then of course Poe. And we not only do Annabel Lee and the Raven, but a couple of his great stories, the Cask of Amontillado and the Purloined Letter. Poe, a lot of people don't realize that Poe was the originator of detective fiction. He was one of the first detective fiction writers ever.
Oh, really?
Dupin,
I didn't know that.
in the Purloined Letter, his detective uses romantic imagination to get inside the mind and heart of the person he's trying to defeat and solve the mystery. So Poe's contention is, you would think a detective would just be a rationalist, but Poe, of course, a good romantic, says no, to be a detective, you have to be a man of imagination.
There you
have
go.
to be able to get into the mind and heart of the person you're trying to figure out, trying to indict and trying to defeat. So, okay, so then other romantics, and Emily Dickinson is a wonderful late romantic, early realist, and Walt Whitman, a late romantic, early realist. They're somewhere on the cusp between romanticism and realism. We do Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. Twain is a famous early American realist, and of course his picture's on the front of the text. And we also do his Whittier birthday dinner speech, where he sort of comes out at a meeting, at a dinner, honoring John Greenleaf Whittier, and where Longfellow and other romantic writers were present, and he tells a humorous story, Holmes and Whittier, that makes Holmes and Whittier and Longfellow look foolish, and it reminds you of his movement into realism. He doesn't want to write like they do anymore, and so you can see that change that Twain is trying to initiate. And then in the modern age, you do get movements away from Christian faith. Stephen Crane is a naturalist. We look at The Open Boat.
How do you address that? How do you talk about that? I mean, not that, don't give away the book, but just give us a, how do you approach it when you're dealing with a naturalist or somebody that's an atheist?
Yeah, you have Christians learn how to read a naturalist text and hear what it says and what its implications are. And so the ocean and The Open Boat is the wide world, the indifferent universe that cares nothing for the life of man, is beautiful but powerful and dangerous, and man is stuck. Man, it's like a parable for man in the universe. Man is stuck on a boat in the middle of that universal ocean, and there's nobody who cares, and there's nobody taking care of him. And so it helps you explore the implications of naturalism, how despairing it is. They want to cry out to God, but they don't believe there's a God they can cry out to.
Right.
And yet no one can really live as a consistent naturalist. The one person that gets named in the story, Crane, actually was in an open boat. He nearly drowned when a ship he was in went down. No. And The Open Boat is very much based on his own personal experience. Yeah. Well, the one character that gets named is the person who actually drowned, who didn't make it to the shore in Crane's boat. And if you were a consistent naturalist, why would you memorialize anybody? We're all just accidents.
Great question.
And he's very honest about the yearning that these men have for help, for somebody to care, for this to mean something. So you see in the naturalist this yearning for there to be a God and for there to be a meaning. So I think understanding what naturalism is all about helps us talk to people who live from that worldview perspective, but it also helps us see the longings that any human being is going to have, even after he's rejected God, for there to be someone who cares and for there to be a meaning for the suffering that he's going through. That story makes that really clear.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, it's very affirming of Christian faith. And then we do T.S. Eliot, who actually is a poet who converted to Christianity later on, and
Mm-hmm.
The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is a wonderful expose of a 20th century intellectual who's trying to make his way through the world without God and not doing a good job of it. And the need for something more, for something higher, is so clear in that poem. It's not that much a surprise that a few years later, Eliot converted to Christian faith. And we have a few explicitly Christian, other explicitly Christian writers. Flannery O'Connor,
Oh yeah.
and I'm a Southerner, so I enjoy the fact that Flannery O'Connor and Eudora Welty are in the text, and we do some novels. I think you've got to do good American novels, so we do those novels are not in the text, but Huckleberry Finn and
Love that.
The Great Gatsby and To Kill a Mockingbird and Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, and then
Oh,
Lorraine
good
Hansberry's
ones.
play A Raisin in the Sun. And there are questions and answers that take you through every chapter in all of
Okay.
those novels. The novels themselves aren't in the text, but elaborate questions and answers are. And
Oh,
then some of
good.
the later works, to keep the price of the text down, we didn't pay copyright permissions for some of the 20th century works, but I specifically selected works that could easily be found online or
Oh,
and
good.
easily gotten in an American Lit anthology in a used bookstore somewhere. Stuff that's really easy to find, and there are questions and answers for those. And
That's fantastic.
yeah, so yeah.
So, question for you. Something from, we with Hip Homeschool Moms, we have all kinds of a diverse audience that watches. But something that occurs to me as I'm reading and listening to you is, what about the children that have that are struggling readers? I mean, how do you address that, or is there an aspect of it that helps the struggling reader encourage them through American literature, in
Okay.
any literature
Yeah.
study?
Well, I tried to pick texts and parts of text that are accessible and they're
Okay.
footnoted. One thing nice about Google having internet access these days is that you can do research so quickly.
Right.
Abigail Adams is writing to John about a British nobleman who made a speech in favor of the American colonists in Parliament, and
Right.
she names him the Duke of so-and-so, and I'm able to find out within 5 minutes on the internet exactly which Duke in a long line of Dukes of so-and-so actually gave that speech. And so there are a lot of footnotes that give geographical and topical references and define vocabulary words, but also just the fact that the questions on each work go step by step through the
Yes.
work and have students look at one piece of it at a time.
Right.
And
Breaks
by
it down
the end,
into
the
manageable
students,
chunks. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
by the last question, the students see this is not gobbledygook and it's not incomprehensible. It actually all makes sense and it all fits together. And if there's a person who's a slow reader, there's nothing that says that to do the course you have to do every work. And even on a work that you do, there's no law that says you have to do every single question. The parent can pick the ones that she wants the student to actually write answers for. The others could be discussed verbally. And then my answers are there online so that even the questions they don't answer themselves, they can look at my answer and prepare themselves for a test.
That's a running discourse among homeschool moms. Many of us, me included, are OCD, and we have this desire to finish the book. It's like there's a book, you're supposed to cover everything in that book, and you're supposed to finish that book. Thank you very much. Every single author I have ever interviewed has said, you don't have to finish the entire book.
You don't have to do every question or every word.
So thank you for saying that. You just gave a ton of moms this huge, I can hear the collective gasp of relief over here. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, when my son Sam was, I think when he was 15, 16, we actually piloted the questions and answers for a good bit of the book with a group of 8 boys that he was in a homeschool co-op group with. And they seemed to like the questions and answers, to get a lot out of them, to feel like they were learning things. The papers they were able to write and they made sense, but we did not have them answer even in our own homeschool
Yay!
pilot, we did not have them answer all the questions. So
Okay, see y'all, we have
yeah,
freedom here.
yeah,
I think they enjoy having meaty discussions.
yeah,
Literature brings meaty conversation and discussions to the family, not just
yes,
to a co-op, but to
yes,
family discussions. I mean, y'all get into it like you were talking about earlier, huge worldview discussions and
yes,
the whys of life come out in
yes,
literature. So
right,
it's definitely we read together as a family out loud, and I have high schoolers. We still do it, and a lot of those questions come up when you're
yeah.
doing that, and so I love that. I love
Yeah, if
that.
this book could lead into some great family discussions, I would be very pleased. That's a big part of the aim of the book.
Well,
Yeah.
something else you talk about that now I'm really curious about because once you get to high school, we're looking at credits and we're looking at how
Hmm.
credits work and how we can put them on the transcript. But
Yeah.
you're bringing in a ton of history.
Yes.
So, is this American literature? Are you just counting American literature credits? Talk about the credit system here because I
Okay.
think there's more
Well,
that
we're
you can
not going to
claim.
try to make it be a history credit, but we
Right?
do think the students are going to do so much writing if they write answers to a significant proportion of these questions. And out of the 18 module tests, there are 16 of them have an essay as part of
Oh
the
yeah.
chapter test, and then they write these two literary interpretation papers.
Oh.
And even some of the answers in the analysis of the works, occasionally at the end there will be a question that says write a paragraph or two in response to this question. So they're doing a lot of writing in the course. They get to check their writing against. As they're checking my answers, they're not just getting information; they're getting in the answers a model of clear, persuasive writing.
Right.
And there's a grammar section in the appendices of
Oh.
the student notebook that goes through a number of different grammar punctuation rules that I think are most critical. There's a selection in the appendices that shows them how to introduce and punctuate and document quotations, which a lot of people don't know how to do. There's a section that shows how to paraphrase without plagiarizing. How can you summarize something that's going on in a story or an essay without getting too close to the wording of the original? There's
Right.
real specific instructions on how to change the wording and sentence structures enough so that they're really yours. And so really, we believe there's plenty of writing and plenty of writing instruction for this to be a writing course, for
Yay.
this to be a
Okay.
composition as well as a literature credit.
That's
I've looked at other homeschool programs and what they're uh, uh, offering for composition credit, and I would say the writing instruction and the writing experience are more extensive than a lot of programs out there that are giving a full composition credit. So we argue that, I mean, I'm not going to die on this hill. If state regulations in somebody's state are different, that's fine. But
yeah.
we argue that this course can be both a full American literature credit and a full year of composition credit.
That's fantastic. That is
Yeah.
a blessing too for high schoolers
Mhm.
because we're always looking at the opportunity to cross over into other areas. And I love how it feeds American literature. I mean, it feeds American history. What a perfect study to do together and let it
Yes.
actually be your springboard into what you're studying into American history. I
Yes.
love that. Mm,
Yeah, literature can really help you understand the worldview of a period, how people were thinking and feeling, what it was like to walk
yes.
down the street on an ordinary day. Literature really helps you get a sense of the spirit of an age, and the introductions to the periods that I provide also, in addition to the specific literary work students are studying, yeah, do give a lot of the intellectual history that goes with American history. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I absolutely love that. So now I'm even more excited about it. So tell us a little bit about how the course actually works. So we've talked about there's questions, we've talked about and answers. But if a person was getting ready to pick it up and start using it, I know there's a workbook. So
Right.
explain to us how you laid it out. I now know that
Right.
you're covering periods instead of just
Right.
works of.
Right.
So sort of give us the big overview of how it works and what a
Okay.
mom and student can expect from this.
Okay. You would read the introduction to a period like the colonial age. You would
Okay.
start probably with the colonial age. And then for any work, there's some kind of author bio, or even for the Cherokees, there's a brief history of the Cherokee people and
Oh, I love
a
that.
brief discussion of how their mythology fit into their culture. And so you would read a brief author bio, and then you would just start writing answers to questions. And in the workbook, the questions are all that are in the text, the main text, are all repeated with space for the students to write their own answers. Now, there's nothing sacrosanct about writing them in the spaces in the workbook. They could type their answers if they wanted to, but they would go question by question, or maybe do a subset of the questions that their teacher or parent assigned to them,
Right.
and write the answers.
Okay.
Then there is a website, an Apologia website, and the password is WhitLit. And that web address is provided in the opening introductory essay of the book. And they can go to that website and look at my answers to the questions they've just answered. They can check their answers against mine. If there are questions that they thought about but their parent didn't ask them to actually write or type an answer, they can look at my answers to those questions as well. And then they would finish they would do that for every work in the module, in the chapter.
Okay.
And then there's in the notebook, the student notebook, there's a module test that they can take.
Okay.
It usually involves an essay, and as I give the essay assignment, I talk them through how to write the essay even there on the test. And then there are multiple choice answers, matching fact things, quotation identifications from the module. So probably to prepare for the test, they could skim over all the questions and answers, including the ones they didn't write, and just then they would be perfectly ready to take the module test. And parents are responsible for timing the test however they want to. And then they would go to the next module that would probably still be in the same period. Usually there are 2 or 3 modules in any given main American literature period. And they would keep on working through. And there are 9 modules for the first semester and 9 for the second. And when they get to, I think it's module 8 in the first semester, and they're working on Robert Frost's poetry, then I give the paper assignment in the student notebook. There's a clear explanation of the paper assignment, and then it walks them through the writing of the paper. And then there are instructions online for the parent about how to grade the paper and what might constitute an A or a B. There's a rubric for the A, B, C, and D papers, and a discussion of just how to show grace to students, but also how to hold up a standard.
Yes,
It
exactly.
pushes them a little past their comfort zone and teaches Christian students to work heartily as unto the Lord, not fearfully, but heartily, giving things a good shot.
Right. So, and how many modules are there?
There are 18 total.
Okay.
So you can do 9 per semester. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So, anything else that they need? So, I guess some of it you have to purchase the book, like we were talking about covering novels, and then some of it you're doing excerpts. So, but all of the excerpts are actually there with the
with the text until you get to some of the copyrighted things in the 20th century, and they would probably pull up a poem online, print it out to work with it. And the questions are all keyed to line numbers, and there are a few 20th century stories that they would need to be able to find, but a lot of them could be found online or very easily found in a used bookstore. So there would be a few things they would have to find, and certainly the novels they would have to purchase. But again, they're common classic novels that could be gotten cheaply.
Right. I just wanted to make sure, sort of give them an idea because, as folks are budgeting and getting ready for their new school year, we want them to know, exactly what they're looking at.
And the questions for the novels are all keyed to the chapters, not to pages. So it would be easy to go through the novel with any addition.
Perfect. Okay. So anything else that you feel like I didn't ask you about that you wanted to cover that you wanted to make sure
Let's
you
see.
shared about?
Yeah, I think one of the feelings that I think this book will give students is a sense of being on the inside, really getting literature,
Oh yeah.
maybe for the first time, where they feel like they're thinking along with this really bright, perceptive, articulate person, this author who's observed carefully and thought deeply about life, and then represented those observations in a vivid story or poem or novel or play. I think they'll, instead of thinking, well, Mark Twain wrote it or Edgar Allan Poe wrote it, so I guess it's supposed to be good. I'll accept that it's good, but I don't really get it. Or maybe
Right.
that's supposed to be a symbol. My teacher says it's a symbol, but I don't see
I don't
how
see
it's a
the
symbol. But I
symbolism.
want a good grade, so
Yeah.
I'll say it's a symbol. I think they're going to see from the questions are going to take them enough through the work step by step that they're going to see, oh, I see why this is a symbol. The author has
Yeah.
given me about 4 different signals that this is a symbol. And they're clear pointers to what it's a symbol of. So, yeah, I get it. I get why this is a symbol, or I get why somebody would say The Great Gatsby is a really profound novel about the American dream and its
Right.
beauties, but also its brokenness. Or I get why Poe is seen as a brilliant craftsman, and I see what's going on here, and I see where his vision can be embraced by a believer, and where it needs, parts of it need to be rejected. I think they're going to feel more like they get it, like
That's
they're on the
fantastic.
inside, like,
Mm-hmm.
which is a cool feeling. You know,
Yes.
I'm thinking along with this really smart, sophisticated person. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not standing on the outside, sort of feeling like a doofus and wondering why I don't get it. But it's supposed to
They're
take them
welcomed
onto
in.
the, yeah, the eight guys that we piloted this with, they weren't all big literature lovers, but they seemed to think it was cool. But they were
Yeah.
learning, they were getting it. I think that's part of the feeling that I want the text to provide.
That's fantastic. I love it. I'm excited. Okay, so we had at least one question over here. It said, is this geared toward any of the high school grades or more just for the upper level? So it's not, I think American literature is usually covered at a junior
Yeah,
level, right?
10th or 11th grade is what I was
Yeah.
looking at.
Okay. Okay, good. So there you go, Jill. If you have any other questions, pop them in. I'm going to open this up. Usually, homeschool moms do not like to join us on air, but most of us are running around in our PJs, and I would have been
Mhm.
at least without makeup. You saw me
Yeah.
the other day. You know I was without makeup and no hair and all that. So that's the typical, homeschool mom. I told you I'd
Yeah.
have on hair. I'd have my hair done and my makeup on today.
Well, on my summer breaks, I'm not always that put together in the morning either.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open it up, but I don't expect anybody to dial in. But if they do, that's fantastic. So before we close, tell us a little bit about what your homeschool looked like. Tell us what it felt like in your home, in your educational system.
Okay. Well, Amy is the one who really
Right.
ran the thing, and I weighed in at important points, particularly when our kids got older. She felt like they needed my help, and with our boys, she wanted me to become more the supervisor of their
That's
education as
right.
they got into their middle
Yeah.
teens. So definitely, I did that. But Amy is like a camp counselor. She gets up enthusiastic. She's a
Oh.
natural learner. She's a fast reader. She loves examining curricula,
Oh yeah.
and she has this interest in the world around her. You know, so the homeschool day could stop because we see an indigo bunting at the feeder, or maybe we stop to use the Peterson's guide to
I love
identify a
it.
new bird that we haven't seen before, or there's a big fat toad that's sitting by the drippy water hose in the backyard, and we put him in an aquarium and see what he likes to eat,
Steady.
and we find he likes to slurp earthworms, or that even an ordinary looking toad can make a cricket disappear in a blur.
Yeah.
And Amy is just she's enthusiastic about learning, and for her, uh, all the subjects reflect something of the complexity and the truth and the beauty of God. She's
Yeah.
that connection is real natural for her. So she made learning fun for our kids, and she also is a real thinker, so she would push them, and of course with and she's a good. She and I had good relationships with them, so we we sometimes pushed them out of their comfort zone and got by with that, and but a lot of it was fun and interesting, and you could. We had a friend who once worked at the Knoxville Zoo, so and our kids have ridden Galapagos tortoises in that zoo,
Oh, how
uh, and
fun!
and she was head of the penguins in the Tennessee Aquarium. So our kids have patted penguins, and Amy's great at
Oh,
organizing field trips and
I
neat
want Amy
things,
to be
neat
around
learning
here. I want her
experiences.
in my co-op.
Yeah, and she's a special. Her training is in special education. Got her master's in that, and she taught special ed for 9 years before
Oh
we had our
yeah.
first child, and she stayed home, and uh, so she is really good at figuring out the needs of particular children. Our first son, Will, had an ability curve that had huge peaks and valleys in it. His handwriting didn't become legible at all, probably till he was about 10, and his organizational skills were awful. Uh,
I'm
but
still that way.
but on the other hand, he read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings in about 3.5 weeks when he was 9.
Wow.
And our son Sam actually had some struggle with a reading disability,
Right.
and Mary Claire cried while she was doing math almost every day for about 6 years. Uh,
I
and
totally understand her.
and Cliff is sort of a jack of all trades. He's pretty good at everything, although he likes to make up his own rules for math. But I think we did a pretty good job of making homeschooling really fun and
Yeah.
stimulating and yet pushing our kids to go deeper and to achieve something and to write things that were clear and persuasive. And I think somehow it was a good combination of challenging but fun and relaxed. It seems like that's how it worked.
Oh, it sounds like
Yeah.
it. And if they're out there, catching copperheads in the
Yeah.
creek. I
Yeah. They
think I
call
think there's some logic that was missing there, though. We may
yeah.
need to go back and cover logic there. What are you doing? Playing with poisonous snakes?
Yeah. They were, maybe it says something about our homeschooling that our 24-year-old was out with his
Oh,
wife and our 18 and our 16-year-old in a wilderness area near our house, and they were
I
catching
know.
crawfish and salamanders and letting them go again. But yeah, when they saw the baby copperhead, they had to catch it, and then
Isn't that fun? I love
yeah,
that, honestly. I mean, not
yeah,
that I love snakes. I don't love snakes. We've
yeah,
already had this conversation. But I love that y'all sparked the curiosity and had that environment where they felt comfortable to, go off on those, I call them, rabbit trails, literally
hmm
sometimes, where you're off and it was not on your planner. It was certainly not on your agenda, but life presented this opportunity for you to go study something
yeah,
that you don't always have that opportunity to look at.
right,
And so many moms, I think that's one of the things especially when they're first starting out, they're afraid to get off the planner. They're
yes,
afraid to divert into some of
right,
those. But that's where the fun is. That's where the
yes,
curiosity is. That's where you spark that love of learning.
yeah, yeah. It is tricky because you feel. I know a lot of moms are thinking, I could raise an illiterate child or a child who's not going to be able to go to college or have a career. So you can feel a lot of responsibility, but I think you've got to be faithful and then trust God with that
Yeah.
responsibility so that
He
there can
fills in
be
the gaps.
play and a lot of grace and play and
Yes.
natural interest in the way you do homeschooling.
And a lot of
Yeah, and
prayer.
we tried to be opportunistic when we moved into our present house. The people moving out said, "We really don't want to take this old piano. Can we leave it?" So
Oh,
yeah, we said, "Yes, you certainly may." And
thank you very
that
much.
was what started us on piano lessons. And
Oh, I
when
love it.
Brian had a used practice piano that they were selling, we bought that. So we made an upgrade to a
Oh, I
better
love
used
that.
piano. But each of our children then ended up taking piano for about 10 years and having a pretty strong music background. None of them is a virtuoso, but all of them know a lot more about music as a result of that. And then Amy is good at creating or locating good co-ops.
Hmm.
Sometimes it fit the needs and interests of particular ones of our children. So, Yeah.
That's fantastic. Sounds like y'all had fun. Y'all are almost
Yeah.
at the end of your homeschooling career. Is it sad?
Yeah. Yeah, it is a little bit. I
It
think
is. I
we've
know.
Sam and Cliff, our 18-year-old and 16-year-old, have really been great buddies. And as
Yeah.
each one of our children has gone to college, the next one in line has been sad and has
Yes.
struggled a little
Yes.
bit. And Sam and Cliff are both athletes, so they both like to do a lot of the same things.
Oh
They're
yeah. Yeah.
both
Yeah.
athletes and they're good shots, and they both they've slept on the top and bottom bunk their whole lives. And now
Oh.
Sam is going off to live in the dorm and be in
Oh.
college, and Cliff's the last one left at home. So yeah, I think it's going to be
Y'all have to
hard.
come up. Yeah, it is going to be hard. I know Rachel and Davis. I interviewed them a couple of weeks ago, the Carmens from Apologia, and the one thing they said was they were surprised at the emotions when the children went off to school as they're leaving the nest and flying.
Yeah,
They were a little bit surprised by the emotions of the ones left behind, sort of so to
yeah,
speak. That how
yeah,
hard it is for them and to start again without that piece there, that missing piece,
yeah,
that missing child. It makes a
yes.
difference. It totally makes a difference.
But the fact that there is some sadness is a testimony to the fact that you created some level of
Yes.
peace and happiness
Love.
in your
Yes.
home, and
Yes.
so that's an encouragement to us.
I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
Well, it's been fantastic talking to you. I have loved learning more about your book and about you and how it came to be. Pat's over here saying, she says, I finished with homeschooling, but now I want to read this American literature course just for
Uh,
myself.
uh,
So I
yeah,
agree totally. So thank you for spending some time with us this morning and sharing with
yeah.
us, your heart and how it came to be, but also your faith and your walk with God. We really appreciate the fact that we now have an option for American literature that is faith-based and that brings scripture to the table and allows us to look at American literature and literature in general in a different way. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, thanks so much, Trish, for interviewing me. This has been
It's
a fun
fun.
conversation, and Leanne, thanks for your help.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
God bless you
I'm
guys.
Stay there. I want to turn the recording off now.